What's up, everybody? It's Corey here with Good Evening Tech, and today we're going to go over how to create something in the DOM using TypeScript. So what this is right here is a little project we'll be doing. So what I viewed with this is, let's say you're running an apartment website or something and you need to know all the names of somebody's pets. What you can have right here, name of pets, and you can just add and remove. Super simple project, but something that can add a lot of dynamicness to the form. So what we'll be using for this project is npm, Snowpack, Bootstrap CSS, and TypeScript itself. So first thing we need to do, not use Windows Terminal. Let me pull this over. So for me, I will be using npm, Visual Studio Code, font size 20. Let's see if that's good. But what I'm going to do inside this folder, you can use anything you want, Windows, Mac, WSL, Windows, whatever it is, just make sure you have npm installed. I'm going to run npm init in this folder. And I'm just going to cycle through with all the yeses, whatever it needs. Boom, it should create a package.json. There we go. Perfect. Now what we're going to do is install some stuff. So I'm going to install Snowpack as a dependency. So Snowpack is like Webpack. It handles generating our TypeScript to JavaScript. It can be used to create bundles. I like it a little bit better for Webpack for small stuff like this because it's just easier to set up. Let that run through what it needs to run through. Right, perfect. Installed a million packages, just like npm should. I'm going to run npx snowpack init. This creates our snowpack file right here. And then I'm going to run npm I is short for install, so you can spell it out if you want to, but npm install. We're going to be using a special tool here called Snowpack plugin TypeScript, and then we'll also install TypeScript. If you didn't know, you can add multiple packages to the same line. Let that do whatever it needs to do. 49 packages installed. And I'm going to use some cheater code over here. So this is the Snowpack dependency we just installed. Gives you the instructions right there. And pretty much what we need to do is add these plugins right into here. Get rid of that because it's just overlapping the same text. Perfect. And what else do we need to do for here? I don't think anything else. I'm going to do npx TypeScript --init. That'll create a TypeScript JSON file for us. It's yelling, if you see the error there, it's just saying there's no TypeScript files. That's all it's getting mad about. All right, we're going to go into our package JSON and we're going to create some scripts. Scripts are when you type npm, this is what runs for it. So I'm going to replace this test with start. And in here, I'm going to do Snowpack run. And then that's not right. It's Snowpack dev. And then for build, I'm going to do Snowpack build. So build would make the actual project that you could put on the internet. Snowpack dev is more for a development environment. It runs its own little custom server and just makes things easier for us. Hit save there. And what we're going to do is create our files here. So the first one I'm going to make is index.html. Go in here, hit the little exclamation mark. You'll see this is Emmet abbreviation, and it does all of that little boilerplate for us. So handy little trick to know right there, so you don't waste time typing out stuff that's pretty useless. We'll create element in TypeScript as the title. One other thing I'm going to pull over is Bootstrap. So Bootstrap is a CSS framework. If you've never used it before, it's really fun to use. It's really easy to use, and it's good for just framing up something, or if you want to use it in your whole project, you can. But I'm going to copy a CDN of this. A CDN is just a content delivery network. It lets us use the CSS without having to download it. But I'll copy that over. What I'm going to do in here is type hello world. And then I'm going to create a folder called source. And in here, I'm going to call this, what should we call it? I'll call it app.ts. And in here, I will type console.log. We'll do connected. This is just a test to make sure everything connects so we don't run into weird problems later and we're scratching our head, what is going on? Then we'll do source and then app.js, because TypeScript is great, but browsers have no idea how to read it. All right, now that that's like that, that's like that. Let's do npm run start. And I'm going to shut down my other one so that we can use it on port 8080. Let's see what it does. Grab it over here. It says hello world. Console says connected. Beautiful. This right here, this has a live updater, so anytime you change something in the project, it'll automatically change over here. But that's how you get it connected. So let's get started on this. All right. I have too many windows open here. That's the fun part about doing all of this. All right, all right, all right. Now what we are going to do is I'm going to type out some HTML. And all these classes that you see here are part of Bootstrap. So if you don't want to use Bootstrap, you can just completely ignore the classes going in here. But if you do it that way, it's going to look pretty ugly. So I recommend doing it, but hey, you're your own person. I'm going to do a row. Now, what I'm doing here is Bootstrap has this lovely column system, or sorry, grid system, where it separates everything into 12, and we can create spacing with it to just have our item in the middle. This is the way I found that's the easiest to get everything into the middle. Do 6, so this div will take up 3 sections, this will take up 3, and this will take up 6. So it puts everything in the middle for us and makes everything look nice. I always like things in the middle. That's just how I am. I do this inside of a field set, legend, name of your pets. I'll give this a div ID of pet container. We'll be using that later in the TypeScript. And we'll just go through, type in every single thing out. This is one thing people don't like about Bootstrap, but I don't really mind, is the amount of divs you use to just create a nice little grid system going on. I don't mind it. Some people say it makes it look tacky, but hey, it's easier than writing out CSS. I'm not a huge fan of CSS. It's important, I understand it, but not my cup of tea. You know, an area label, if you decide to use something like this, it just helps for screen readers to understand exactly what that form is. All right, self-closing there. That div is out. Then we're going to do a div class of column 4. And we will do a button of class btn dash danger. And then I'm going to give it a class of remove button. So if you're not using Bootstrap for this, this is the one place where a class does matter, is this remove button, because we will be using it to get it inside of our TypeScript file. Now, this right here, this type button, it depends on the browser that you're using, but what this is used for is If I didn't put this on here, sometimes they can submit the form, and we don't want that in our life. But what we'll do here is type remove, so the button has that. Scrolling on down, seeing what else we need. All right. Put in here div class of margin bottom 3. One here, button ID. Add that button. Type a button for the same reason we don't want it to submit the form. The class of btn. I want to do success for this one. Helps when you can spell. And then we'll do add. Oh, and I want this inside the field set. Boop, boop. Perfect. All right. Let's hit save there and see what it made. Ooh, what did I spell wrong here? Put one more S. There we go. So it's got the add button. Get rid of that. As you can tell, nothing happens there because we haven't written the TypeScript. So that's what we're going to move on to next. Go into here, get rid of that. We don't need it anymore. We're going to grab all of that HTML that we made. Get element by ID. Hit container. And as HTML div element. If you're following along with this and for whatever reason you can't have TypeScript, things like this that say as HTML div element, just ignore it. You can still do this in JavaScript. I just like TypeScript better because I have a short attention span and I forget a lot of what I'm doing. So this helps me create everything. And the way I look at TypeScript is it helps keep yourself accountable. So if you write a bunch of crazy code, you'll notice if you start to use TypeScript, it gets kind of frustrating and all the times it'll yell at you. But it's for a good reason. So like here, this query selector, I'm telling it, hey, it's going to be an HTML button element that I'm pulling from this. And these will be HTML. So if I try to call a method that doesn't exist on this later on, in JavaScript, it'll just throw an error, but in TypeScript, it'll bug you and say, hey, you can't do that. But understand with TypeScript that it is not, what's a good word for it? You can't use it on the browser, so this will be turned into TypeScript. It's just a tool to help you try to write better code. All right, what we're going to move on to now is a big function of this. So if you don't want to type this out, you're more than welcome to go to my website that'll be linked in the description, and it will have this written out for you. But when you create items in TypeScript or JavaScript, it doesn't matter. You can either do a template literal, which is the backticks, and you can do things just like this, and it can generate valid HTML. But if you want a little bit more control over it, you can use DOM elements to create these items and have a little bit more control over them. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a function. I'm going to keep all of this inside a function so we can use it later. And we can call on it programmatically. And you can take this function, you can use it somewhere else, you can modify it so that it creates exactly what you want instead of just writing it in the main file as is. It gets kind of clunky. But the first thing we're going to do, and if you're curious what we're doing this entire time, if you like to visualize something, so from here all the way down to here is what we're duplicating. So that's what we'll be doing this entire time. All right, we're going to create an element of type div. This is going to be the main div that we see. And I'm going to put down here that I'm returning the add pet div so that that error goes away. Errors like that always bother me. Now, what I like to do here is group everything together. All right. I like to group them together with themselves, so I know exactly what's going on with each element. Create another div. Add pet div container dot class list.add container. Making sure I'm doing this right so you don't see me mess up in the video. I understand that nobody in the world codes exactly like this, where they do everything perfect and everything sunshine and rainbows. It's a lot of trial and error. I'm just adding those there as documentation for it. Remember, TypeScript keeps you accountable. When your code's actually made, all of that will magically disappear. These are all methods inside of JavaScript as well that you can call on. The way I like to lay all of this out is how I'm going to add everything back to the DOM in order. Just so it mentally makes sense to me. Telling me that's supposed to be a div. There we go. It's HTML div element. Then add pet div column 8 class list dot add column 8. Perfect. The nice part about a function too is once you write this out once, that's the only time that you have to do it. All right, pet name input dot class list dot add form control, another bootstrap thing. Pet name input dot set attribute. So set attribute lets you add whatever you want to an element in terms of their attributes. Like for an input type equals text, we just say what attribute we want to do and what value we want it at. Especially for inputs, there's a lot of stuff that you can add to an input. Right, as we can see here, placeholder, and pet name, and one more area label for screen readers. Type that out, perfect. Let's add pet div column 4 equals document dot create element. Create a div as an HTML div element. Add pet div 4 equal or class list dot add column 4. Now we'll handle the remove button, glue everything together, and then all of that will be done. Hopefully I copied it the same over. Button as HTML button element. Move button dot class list dot add. Now with this method, you can either type all the classes out individually like I'm going to do, or you can just put them all in the same string. But I like doing it individually just in case I go back to it. I remember that these are all separate classes. Remove pet button dot set attribute type equals button. And remove pet button dot inner HTML. This is what's inside the cross braces. What's going to be set on the button equals remove. And we will do remove pet button dot add event listener. Click anonymous function. And what we will do is go to the top level div and remove it. So the reason I like doing it this way too is you'll see later on when we add an event listener to the first one of these that we make, instead of having to traverse the DOM, we can just grab the element like this, add the event listener, and it looks a lot easier just to do this instead of what we're going to do for the first button. So yes, this way it's a lot of code being added this way. In other projects I've done where I make things like this, I make a custom function to make HTML documents that take all of this and put it into one line. All right, now we are going, I like to put this as the appending line. Add pet div dot append. The append method, add will only take HTML DOM elements. So if you're going to use this method, it needs to be nodes, and nodes are any kind of DOM element. And the order that we do this in only matters when it's going to the same item. So if we add something to the pet div and then we add another item to it, it'll go in that order. Add pet div row append, as you will see here. Add pet div column 8 and then add pet div column 4. If I could spell things right. Column 4. Oh boy, what did I spell wrong here? Oh, I'll just go with that name. Perfect. Make sure that nothing crazy happened there. Boop-a-doop boop. Looks good to me. Add pet div column 8 dot append pet name input. Now the order that you do this, like we appended this before we appended this, doesn't necessarily matter because it's just grabbing this item itself. We'll do add pet div 4 dot append, add the pet button into there, and we're returning that. Now what we're going to do is add our event listeners for the add button and that initial item that we had. The initial remove button. There we go. Add event listener. Hit it with the old click. What we're going to do is go in here. So this big old function that we made, it'll look nice in here for clarity. If we're like, hey, what does this event listener do? We're going to grab the pet container and hit append to it. And then what we'll do is call this function, create pet form, and that's all we have to do for there. So if at just a glance you collapse this or you move this function into another file, you're like, oh, okay, we're just creating another form input element here. It makes it a lot easier to read, is you don't want to jam all that code inside the event listener trying to figure out what the event listener does when you can just see it right there. What I'll do is grab the first removal button. I'm going to put an exclamation mark there, otherwise TypeScript yells at us because it'll say, hey, that might be null. But putting the exclamation mark there says, hey, this item will exist, TypeScript. And when we go through with this, we do parent element, parent element, parent element, dot remove. So what's happening with this is we're traversing up the DOM. So the parent element for this button is 1, 2, and then 3. It's going to grab those and then it's going to, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. And so it's going to grab that and it's going to remove the third element up. I don't like the look of this because, as you can see, I think it looks kind of ugly at going up these levels. And what if you add another div or anything like that? That's why I like this containerized thing. But the reason that I'm building it like this is when some form of web scraper goes over a website, it's just going to read the HTML. So if I build a form here, it's going to be picked up by that and give that web scraper a little bit more insight to what that specific page is. But if you build it all in JavaScript, that's great, but there's a chance that the web scraper will never actually see it. So that's why it's done that way. But let's see if this works. Hit add. So we can see it adds them. The first one disappears. All of them go away, and we can add all of them back. And that's it to it. So if you like the video, the little instruction set, please hit that like button, leave a comment down below if there's different topics you want me to cover, and I hope you have a great evening.